Welcome to Curate Your Career, a museum career podcast about staying, leaving, and everything in between. I'm Elin Filbey, museum educator turned career coach.
And I'm Alli, Schell, career coach specifically for museum professionals. And we're here to talk about all the messy, exciting, and sometimes confusing parts of working in museums.
Each week, we'll share stories, real advice, and quick wins to help you figure out your next move, whether that's staying, leaving, or just making your current job work better for you.
So let's dive in, because if there's one thing museum professionals are great at, it's overthinking. We're here to help you think smarter, not spiral. So take a breath and let's get started. All right, Elin, since both of us went to DC and went to GW, George Washington University, for grad school, I want to know what was your favorite thing to eat there? Could be restaurant, could be just food, like a food type in general, but yeah.
I mean, as a grad student, I was poor AF when I lived there, just like a lot of ramen in my life. Okay, so it's a toss up for me. And the second one is people might think is gross, but like I low-key loved it. So, okay, there was do you remember that deli on campus? And it was like a hole in the wall deli. It was like across the street from one of our classroom buildings. I bet she was probably not even there anymore. It was like really old.
You'll have to send it to me afterwards.
Yeah. And okay, these are actually both gross now that I'm saying them out loud. So the one, it wasn't even a BL, it was a bagel, and they had like bagels, and it wasn't even a BLT. It was just an everything bagel with like an inch of cream cheese and a pile of bacon.
Oh my God, it's like one of my favorite Wawa orders is that with cucumbers. You gotta add cucumbers to it.
Yeah, always with cucumbers.
It'll change. Oh my God, so good.
Yeah. It was so good and like salty and fatty and like that was good. Okay, and then my other one that is like maybe low key gross, but it was okay. You remember the food carts that are all around the mall, and not like they like sell like Gatorade and hot dogs and like t-shirts, but they also sell egg rolls, and those egg rolls slapped. They were so good.
Oh my God.
I was always hitting up the egg rolls at those little carts. I wonder if I haven't been to DC since I graduated, but I wonder if they're still there because
I'm sure.
yeah, they're just like, and it's not like a food truck, right? Like they sold like snacks and stuff and t-shirts and like other like souvenirs. But yeah, the egg rolls from those carts at the mall.
Oh my God.
So good. I love them.
I feel like I missed out.
Yeah. So what about you?
I remember, and shout out to my friend Melissa, who I hope is listening, or I'll send this to her, because when we were in, I think like our second last year, I think it's called, I just looked it up. It's called Astro Donuts and Fried Chicken. So it was a fried chicken and donut place opened under the building, or like right next to the building where I was taking class. So you guys, I think ours moved. So Elin, we were both at GW, but like the two different programs, which we'll get into. But anyway, so that opened, and that was very dangerous. But by the time a lot of times I would come to class, they were out, because like usually those places they till they run out, and I had classes mostly in like the afternoon and evening.
Because your guys' classes were like downtown by like Chinatown, kind of, right? Like was it Farragut Square?
Oh my gosh! Now I'm trying to remember. We were off between like 14th and G.
Okay, because I totally remember that, because we had to take some museum studies grad classes, and I was like,
yeah. Oh yeah. We were by Chinatown. That's right. Yeah.
By Chinatown. Okay, I totally remember that place. Yes.
But my first year was on like actually in like Foggy Bottom area. I just remember like in a basement of a building.
Through?
Yeah. So then all my classes. Anyway, lore.
Yeah.
Anyone who's went to the GW program. So that was 2011 to 2013 for me. And Elin, you were just like we overlapped, but obviously you were in the education program.
The ed program, yeah, I was there 13 to 14, and that's like also something to like we'll talk about is like because your program was like 2 full school years, right?
Yep.
Okay, mine was 4 semesters, but just like all squished together. So it was like summer, fall, spring, summer, and then we graduated. Yeah, I appreciated that because it was like. And we'll talk about cost of living too in this episode. It's like it just kind of like shrunk our cost of living because we didn't have to stay in DC for the extra summers or like the extra year, I should say. Oh,
Yeah, absolutely. I would have loved that.
yeah.
And I know a lot of people go abroad. Like I have quite a few friends that have studied abroad, and their programs usually are 1 year. So in some ways, like it ended up being a little cheaper. We'll talk about options some more, so I
Mhm.
won't go into so much detail. But
Mhm.
they worked some stuff out, and they were like, you know what? Actually, it's either going to end up being the same or cheaper just to go and study in Scotland and get a musology degree or something over there.
Mhm.
So
Mhm. Yeah.
anyway, oh my gosh, now I'm thinking about DC food. District Taco. I'll just do one last shout out for District Taco. I don't know if
Yeah,
you ever
wait.
had it.
Where was that place at?
All over.
It
I mean, I
sounds
was
familiar.
yeah, I lived out in the Arlington, Alexandria area, so there was one in
Okay.
Alexandria, but there was ones in DC too. But
Yeah, that sounds so familiar. Man, my other favorite though was kava. Loved kava.
ooh, I
Yeah.
don't think I ever. Man,
It was
I
like a
wish we knew
Mediterranean
each other then.
Chipotle. Yeah, I know.
I don't even know what else I was eating. Well, I also worked at a coffee shop. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'll back it up. It wasn't just a coffee shop. It was a New Orleans style eatery. And the chef was actually on like Food Network for things. So I was getting like good food there.
Was it in the district or was it in Virginia?
It was in Courthouse. So in Virginia,
Yeah.
right? Like the metro station was right there.
Yeah.
It's still there. And so like, yes, I would just like all the things. I was like, all
Yeah.
right, well, getting the discount. So
Yep. 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 You're like mine as
shoving
well.
beignets in my mouth, choking on powdered sugar.
Right. You're like worth it.
So worth it. Anyway, well, let's get into talking about grad programs. And this
Yeah.
is going to be a 3-part series
Mhm.
because there's so much to talk about.
Yeah, we originally had this like we are writing our outline and we are like we got to break this up because this is just otherwise y'all be listening to a 2-hour episode, which, whatever, but it's
I don't want to listen to myself for 2 hours.
no, I don't either. I don't either, and I don't think you guys do too, but we wanted to break it up and to have it be more digestible because this is one of the top questions that we both get asked in the Museum Pro subreddit. It's like gets asked pretty much every day and people are like, we just need to have a mega thread on this. Like, please stop asking this question. So shout out to the Museum Pro subreddit. We're trying to, help you out here with this episode. It's seen on LinkedIn, NEMPN, the National Emerging Museum Professional Network. Should I go to grad school for museums? 10, and I'm sure you see it too. It's like the number one question.
I feel like in any of these groups, like every day it pops up.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I used to
Mhm.
sit and try to like reply to them. And then I was like, I'm saying the same things. I can't do this.
Yeah. 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 And so, Ellie and I opened up our LinkedIn pages and we scoured through, the subreddit and other places where people are talking about these things to get feedback and consensus. And I shouldn't even say consensus, but perspectives on this question. And we got some valuable insights and some testimonials and some more questions. So, like, do I need this degree to move up in the field? Is it worth the cost? Will it actually open doors? What if I already have experience? What if I don't want to stay in museums forever? There's a lot to consider when we have this conversation.
So I think that's why this is just like not a simple question or conversation for us to have or to answer, why we need 3 episodes for this.
Mhm.
And, the field presents grad school as like the default path. And it is also what people just naturally default to is, oh, I just get more school. And we'll go into a little bit more of the psychology behind that. But when you talk to people about their experiences, kind of like what Elin was mentioning, like answers are all over the place. And so we're not going to give you necessarily a yes or no. We're going to give you some guidance. We're going to give you our own insights. And basically, we want to kind of present all the information because there are really good grad programs too. So, we're going to try to be conscious to not go out and bash grad schools overall. But basically, we want to give you all the tools to have in your toolbox to make a smarter decision about, yeah, if this is the right thing for you to do.
Right. And I think there's a lot of nuance in this, right? Like Allie and I both went to grad school. We went to the same university, but did different programs. And we're not anti grad school in and of itself. We just want people to understand the nuance and the layers that are a part of this. And I think it's also a really emotionally loaded question because it's not just about going to school. It's not just about the learning. And museum people, we love to learn. Like, if I could be a lifelong student, I would. I'd be in school forever. And I think that's the default of a lot of people in the field. And so that's why grad school seems like such a appealing option because it's like, oh my God, I love museums. I love learning. I'm gonna love learning about museums. Duh. Yeah. I mean, it was
It sounds amazing.
right. I know. I'm like, I did love my grad program, right? But it brings up also these questions about identity and legitimacy and feeling like you're doing the quote unquote right thing for your career. And so, yeah, like Allie said, it's not a simple question. We're not going to give you a yes or no. We want to help you in think through this in a strategic way that will help you make a decision. And so this is a three-part series. So today is going to be diving into the question of should I go or shouldn't I go? And we're going to talk about pros and cons. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, right? Like why might you want to consider this? Why might you not want to? Episode number 2 is going to be okay, so if I do decide I want to look into this further and pursue this more, how should I be going about doing that? How should I be we want to encourage you to think about it like interviewing the school so that you make sure you are gaining something from them as well. And then the third episode is going to be okay, so maybe I'm deciding grad school's not right for me. What are some other ways that I can upskill, gain skills, gain experience so that I can move around within the field? And again, all of this is nuanced and complicated and emotional. And so we don't want to give you a yes or no answer. We just want to help set frameworks for you to think about this so you can make the best decision for yourself.
And the layer two that will add to all this, right, is also like privilege and
Mm,
access as well, which, I think most of us have like in our brains about, grad school and moving through the field. So yes, we might not go as in depth in that just because we're going to give more practical tips, but just know that yes, we understand and absolutely that, will be included as part of the conversation of like, who is able to access and move through these programs and then
mhm.
beyond, right? The pipelines into the field and all that. So that is why it is not such a simple
No,
a
and
simple
yeah, and we will like we do have criticisms of the field on this level too of graduate degree does not equal better or more qualified across the board, right? And so there we do have critiques of the field that we'll get into as well of you don't need to require a master's degree for some of these roles and that is actively harming the museum population and causing these um, discrepancies in who gets to work in museums and who can afford to do so. So just know that we understand and have that context layered in with all of this.
Oof. Oh my gosh. I'm ready to go. Elin and
Let's
I
go.
are like, we've been locked and loaded about this
Yes.
episode for like the past week or so that we decided that we are like, we should actually really cover this. So,
Hmm.
all right, well, let's dive in. So you kind of heard little nuances and little things of like why this question comes up. And that is implying that there's a right answer. Like grad school is the next step. You're seeing
Hmm.
that reflected in job descriptions. You're seeing that advice given out. It's a natural instinct. Maybe you're getting advice from other people. And so for so many people, that's maybe why they went in that direction. But the field is its own unique animal. And so when you look at the reality of what going through grad school and then what's coming out on the other side of that, when you look at the reality, what we are experiencing, which I'm not telling anybody anything new, is of course low salaries, salaries that aren't competitive. So they're not able to properly compensate or make up for the fact that, you are accruing debt from going to get advanced degrees. You're also entering into a really competitive job market with competitive roles. And especially depending on where you end up, there's cost of living that are associated with all of that. So again, you're not getting, the right compensation, you're getting low paying roles, and then it's really hard to find one. And then just uneven hiring practices across the board, right? There's no real standardization, roles aren't standardized. That's why a lot of times my application material that I help people with, we have to make pretty much bespoke applications because a curator can do so many different levels of things, for example. So each role has its own nuances and variability, just depending on the organization size and what they think should be part of that role. And overall, like this is a really high stakes decision that I don't think gets talked enough just about how much is on the line and what questions people need to consider and ask when they're thinking about this.
Yeah. And I think a big part of what people are saying is that it's not really talked about to what you are stepping into after you've gotten a degree and you're entering the market, right? Like I don't ever remember seeing like, okay, the average salary for a museum educator is like 40K and that's in a high cost of living area and you're going to be competing and working nights and weekends and all this stuff. I don't think that there's, like you said, this it's high stakes because it's your life, right? Like it's you have to know what you're walking into and the realities of the field beyond just the program or beyond just the degree. So yeah, just to echo what Alli said, the salaries,
Mhm.
the competitiveness, like it's a bigger decision than just education.
Well, I can kind of speak a little bit to something that I realized when I was leaving my program, because, and this is being truthful, GW, I'm sorry, I'm picking on you a little bit, but it's just, this was like 10 ish years ago that I went through. And, I think like things obviously have shifted and changed. The current
Mhm.
program, I'm sure, is much different than, but I wanted to go into exhibition development and I had no idea the reality of what being an exhibition developer was like for the field, what I actually needed to have backed
Yeah.
up in my skills to do this. I just knew that I was like, oh, I'm doing it, in this DIY fashion in my background at these smaller organizations and just thought like, oh yeah, I'll work at it. Like, I'll just get this degree and I'll learn this stuff and like go on my own naivety and not really understanding like jobs for exhibition developers back then and even today, right? They're hard to come by and it requires a really specialized skill set that I just did not have to the fullest extent. And by the time I left with a degree in it, with a focus in my museum studies degree, I was like, no way I'm going to get any kind of job in exhibition development. And luckily, working in small museums, I was still able to apply those skills because you do everything. So,
Mhm.
and even just largely the idea of interpretation, I was still able to apply to like when I did education. But, now that I adjunct teach museum studies at another university, and I really make sure that I'm like, hey, here are like the roles that you can go into. Here's the reality of those roles. Here's the skill sets that you're going to need. I know there was like a whole bunch of people in my grad program who loved visitor studies, loved doing the evaluations because that was part of our exhibit class. But like, because I was just talking about in class this week, how we evaluate and view visitors, I'm like that you don't really see, I have never see roles pop up very rarely. That's usually now consulting work. So,
Mhm.
for funneling people through these programs and not being like, hey, if you go down this pathway, you might not get a job. And what does that look like? So
Mhm.
it's tough. So having a shift of places being more practical because yeah, it's people are putting money on the line for this. It's a
Yeah.
career decision. It's a financial decision. It's strategy. And some people might not be getting this background, this information, even from their undergraduate schools or other people that they're
Mhm.
asking um, for advice because for other people in other fields, there's certain ways that you move through systems. It's
Mhm.
like a ladder. Okay, you go and get this degree, you go and do this thing. It's going to guarantee this amount of salary or it's going to guarantee this role. So if you apply that to museums, it does not work. And I think that's where like the tension that we run into with so many people. And I'm sure I don't know if you've like experienced that with like your clients too, or yourself of
Mhm.
like just like running into this idea of like the field being like a ladder. And I have to equate it to like the Harry Potter staircases where you're like, oh, I'm going to go up this way. And it's like, no, you're not. That doesn't work. The staircase has changed.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of times people think like, okay, well, if I get the degree, then I will get the job. And that is just not necessarily the case. And I think, we'll talk about this more in the next episode about what to be looking at in these programs to see if it's a good choice. But yeah, it's a degree in museum studies or museum ed or whatever it might be does not always equal job. And I think you also have to think too about the market that you're entering into, right? Like if you're DC, New York, LA, San Francisco, the bigger job markets, Chicago even, you're probably going to need a degree, right? Like that is just like a more of thought of as a requirement in those bigger cities with the more quote unquote premier institutions
Like a way to
where,
measure people in a way, like I'm
yeah,
thinking of just like grad school, right? Like, oh, you had to do
yep,
like take a test or something. Sometimes they're like, okay, this is just a way that we like measure success, which
yep,
we know there's varying ways, but it's
yeah.
easy default.
Totally, totally. But then, like, yeah, if you look at like a smaller market, like I'm in Madison, Wisconsin, I think my degree helped, but I don't think it was like the make or break decision of, getting my first museum job that I got. So, yeah, I think you too have to think too about what that degree means in the market that you're hoping to enter. And when I say market, I mean location market.
Well, and I've seen, and again, I come from a family of teachers. I am such a proponent of education and higher education, but, obviously reality is the field. I just have to put that out there where people have gone on to get PhDs in this field. And maybe we can
Hmm.
talk a little bit about 10 years ago. But, for us, it was different. So I want to ask you a question about, why you went into grad school and like who pushed you
Yeah.
to, what was the push to go there? But I've seen people like that have gone up to get PhDs maybe don't have necessarily like the amount of hands-on work. So you might have like gone directly up through education. And certainly there's hands-on work that you can get through degrees and even, research and the work that you're doing in a PhD program. But then they come out and they're trying to get a job. And they have the dual side of you're overqualified. So places not understanding why a person is applying to a job and they're not making it clear or trying to, and places are still going to just make assumptions as much as you try to explain. Or they'll be like, oh, that's great, but you don't have any hands-on work.
Hmm.
And so I have a lot of PhD people that are just left in this limbo because the field has shifted. Because I think when I was going through, and probably same for you, it was like that was it. Like you just go to grad school. And
Hmm.
definitely there were certain roles that required PhDs, and there still are out there, but I don't see them as much. And so I think that still kind of lingers out there of like, oh, if I want to, be a curator or do this thing, um, I have to get a PhD, and that's definitely shifted for the better. Like, I'm glad to see a shift of, in a way, but there still needs to be some things backing all this up. But yeah, so like, who for you, Elin? Like, what was the push, or like, who pushed you in a sense to go and get your master's?
Yeah. So I I mean, I'd always loved museums. I took some museum classes in undergrad, and I remember just doing some career research one day, and I came across a woman, Mary Ellen Munley. I'll never forget her. And I found her website, and she was a museum evaluator. And I was like, "Oh, that's cool." Again, talking about like, but this mostly exists as consultants then and now. But I just asked her, and this is like, this is what we tell people all the time. I literally cold emailed her and was like, "Hey, I think you have a cool job. I'm interested in going into museums. Can I buy you coffee?" And I left my coffee with her with a contract gig of doing like museum evaluation that summer. So,
What? That's so cool. I didn't know
yeah.
that.
Yeah, yeah. And she did MEP museum education program at GW, and we talked about that program, and I decided that okay, I was a year out of college. I was teaching in Chicago public schools, which was not for me. Loved education, just I didn't like being in the classroom. And she was like, "Yeah, like this is a program I did. I really liked it." And so that was the push for me to do the grad program. And I kinda put all my eggs in one basket. That's just, like, kinda how I live my life. I go off vibes. And so I only applied for MEP. I didn't apply for any of the others. I looked at, like, Bank Street, and I think I looked at Harvard's program. But, yeah, just applied and got in, and I was like, "Let's do it. Like, let's go." So, yeah, it was, I think, also too, like, being young and dumb and 23 and like, "Yeah, I'll just go do this." And, my dad's like, "That sounds great. Way to go. You're gonna be a curator." And I'm like, "No, but okay." So, yeah, so that was, like, how I decided to go, and I think had I stayed in Chicago and poked around a little bit more, I think I probably could have gotten a museum job. But again, I was like 23, frontal cortex not fully developed. and I never lived outside of Chicago before. I was like, I want to go live somewhere else. And I was like, this will help. And my goal too, like, and I should say this, and this is, I think, a question that you have to ask yourself is what is the outcome you're hoping for coming out of grad school? Is it just for the pursuit of knowledge? Is it to get a job? Is it, what is your goal? And my goal was I want to become an easy hire for roles back home in Chicago, right? And that's part two of why I pursued the pedigree of institutions that I worked at and volunteered and took on all this additional stuff was because I knew I wanted to move back to Chicago eventually. Surprised I didn't wind up there close enough, but I wanted them to see my experience and let that speak for itself and be like, wow, you're coming from DC, worked at all these great places. Yeah, you're an easy hire for us. So that was my goal. And that was also just like brash of me. I think I sometimes have like some like blind faith and confidence in myself that some might call delusion, but that was my
Get
goal and that's what I wanted, right? And I think, you have to ask yourself that question too of like what do I want to get out of this? Because I think that going in with the thought process of like, oh, it'll help me get a job is part of it, but you also have to understand that degree does not equal job. You also have to be picking up the contract gigs, doing projects, volunteering. Like it's not just the piece of paper that gets you a job, it's the things that come along with it. So yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. What about you? Were you just like, let's
My God.
go?
That was like the perfect lead in because uh I guess I'll like work backwards with mine. So I had gotten all this experience in museum work, like going into undergrad. So I was like
Mhm.
a youth volunteer. I didn't know I was going to go into museums, but like was always volunteering and interning. And even when I was in college, I was like working in the archives. And then I took
Mhm.
on museum studies 101 class. Everything clicked. And the professor in that class, who was really helpful, and he worked at like the university gallery there, was like, "Hey, here you go. Like, you want to do a career in this, like grad school." And I didn't know. I mean, he was the only person that really
Yeah.
had like opened this door for me, and then was the only person I was like, I don't know who else to talk to besides the people I worked at the archives. Well, archives always require a special degree. Them too, even if I had gone to them more for advice, even though I wasn't going into archival stuff, they probably would have been like, "Oh yeah, get it, get an advanced degree."
Mhm.
So I was like, okay, this is like natural next step. And, having a father that was like, he was the first person in his family to go to college. There was like a sense of pride too. And like my dad will always encourage me, and both my parents, but for
Mhm.
sure, like, yeah, go, do your thing, go pursue your dreams, not realizing that debt I wasn't going to incur. And so like, there was a sense of pride too, of like getting a master's in my family and doing that and knowing like too, like my dad would be proud of that. So
Mhm.
but honestly, like, I probably didn't need it, right? Like, I had so much experience already built up. I mean, sure, I got things out of it, and we'll talk more about, what you can get out of grad school that can be helpful. But,
Mhm.
um, I had enough skills already by that point that, I don't think I really necessarily needed it. But yeah, that was the option at the time, and so many roles too. I mean, that's what you saw, and it was master's required. So I just felt like I needed that to be able to continue on,
Mhm.
um, and do things.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of times it's like getting advice from people in the field and out of the field. I think it just seems like so often like the natural next step. And there's like that pride element too of like, I'm going to grad school. Wow, look at me. And also again for me being really young and being like, well, I don't know what the heck else I'm gonna do with my life. So I might as well buy myself some time and go to grad
Mhm.
school. Yeah, those are all things to consider in this.
Yeah, and even it just made me think of, even getting advice from people in the field, thinking about, like, who you're getting it from, right? So, like,
Mhm.
generationally,
Yeah.
like, even getting, like, advice from me on grad school for some people, right? Like, you might wanna get someone that's just, like, recently graduated that might have more up-to-date stuff versus, like,
Mhm.
people that might be, like, have been in the fields for a while. I mean, there's goods and bads, right? To, like,
Yeah.
weighing all sorts of different things or, like, types of institutions, right? So someone that works at, like, an academic museum versus, like, for me, I knew I always liked small museums.
Yeah.
Wasn't able to, like, quantify that and necessarily at that point, but, that's gonna shape potentially where you end up because seeing the program that I teach at now, they have always had, like, a very small museum, local museum focus, And I was like, "Oh my gosh, if I like, I would have loved that." Like, that would have aligned more closely with my
Mhm.
interests. But again, like, I had no idea. And that's partially too why you go to school or do different things, do internships,
Right.
whatever, is because that helps you say, like, "Yeah, I like that. No, I don't. Oh, okay, this is why, I want to go now to a workplace that
Mhm.
doesn't do this or does do
Mhm.
this."
Yeah.
Anyway,
And yeah, there's a lot of self-discovery and growth that can happen during the schooling process. And I think what we're also encouraging you to do is ahead of time think through as much as you can what you want your outcome to be. If you wanna work at some place with a small if you wanna work in small museums and you wanna go to grad school, okay, are there schools that focus more on small museums? Like the program Allie's talking about. Knowing what you wanna get out of it is so, so important to help you make the best decision.
absolutely. Well, let's talk about some of the things that, yeah, you can get out of grad school. And for you, Elin, what do you think were some of like the benefits or what were some of the things that your grad school offered? Opportunities,
Mhm.
actual like what you learned. I know a little bit about what you all kind of come away with, but would love to hear more about your personal experience.
Yeah, and I think too, like you said earlier, of our insights. We graduated 10 years ago, right? So our insights and our experiences, take them with a grain of salt, and also know that Allie and I are looking at hundreds and hundreds of job postings, and so although we did graduate 10 years ago, oh my God, how did that happen? But although we did graduate a while ago, know that we are seeing on a day to day basis what the field is asking for and whether or not that aligns with a grad school degree or not,
Huh?
right? And so, yeah, I think, I think what my program did really well, and we'll talk about this more in the next episode too, is if you need experience, make sure that the program is offering that. So, my program, one of the things I loved about it was we graduated that program with 2 internships under our belts, countless items for our portfolio. We did an evaluation class that I could show my presentation on. We did a grants writing class. Our program was so hands on and so tactical and practical that even though I was applying for these lower level jobs in DC, right? Like that's part of it too. Like when I was in the DC market, I was, competing against similar people. But then when I was in competing at for jobs in Madison, I was bringing this huge portfolio of work and wealth of experience to the organization, and I think that was really beneficial. So, I think that it can provide you with skills, practical hands-on skills, internships, and then the biggest thing, and I think often really what you are paying for is access. And again, understanding the privilege that comes with this access, but DC, when I was there, was run by the GW Mafia, right? Like, if you wanted to work in a museum in DC, like, it was all GW people.
You are reading my brain because I was just like sitting here thinking about that, how I left DC, but like so
Mhm.
many people went on just to stay in the area for my
Yep.
program.
Yep. Yep, they do. And because the network is there, right? And like an alum of your program is going to know the quality of the student exiting that program and can vouch for them. They might have networked with them. The student might have already volunteered at that organization, right? So that's another thing to think about too, is if you have a target location in mind, right? Because I saw somebody on the Museum Pro subreddit talking about the University of Milwaukee museum grad program. And those people all stay in Milwaukee, right? So it's like if you want to be in Milwaukee or like in the upper Midwest, maybe that's a great program for you. So it's the access. I think a lot of times we think we are paying for the knowledge, and I think good programs do deliver on knowledge that goes beyond theory. But I also think a huge component of what you are paying for is the network. Who are you meeting? Who are your guest speakers that come into class? Who can you network with so that they can recommend you? Who can you get a volunteer or a shadow opportunity with so that you have a leg up in the market? Where do those connections lead, right? So, knowing that networking is extremely important, especially with how tough the market is right now, and that can be extra helpful if you are early in your career, if you're transitioning into museums, or if you feel like you need or want a structured entry point. It's you want to the access and the network and the alumni are I think one of the key points here.
Yeah, and similarly to just about network, like the reputation, even if there isn't like an alumni from that program at a local a local organization or
Mhm.
another museum, certainly they know like you're from GW.
Mhm.
We know you're going to be of a quote unquote certain caliber, right?
Mhm.
Even when I was working with the University of Delaware, which is where I teach now, right? So I would always when I was working in a museum, I would get students from that program. And I just knew like for the most part the students that I get that are going to do internships there, I'm like they're going to be great. And it's just like, so that can in some ways help in building your network too. Okay. And thinking about too in terms of skills that you get out of the program and how you can use them. So, just overall, first and foremost, always what I like to do with people, if they have been typically in a museum studies program, is try to draw out like the hands on skills that they got. Because even if you're doing a mock exhibition or you're creating, you know, a, a fake collections management policy, maybe you're doing some object handling, condition reports, things like that. That still counts as experience. And so many
Mhm.
times we don't actually note that. And, I have certain strategies and things. So, if you're someone that is a recent graduate from one of these programs, maybe you're only, or the core part of your experience now is from your program and from your degree, there is a way that you can build that out to absolutely count. So it doesn't just look like, oh, okay, I got a degree. Like you are still getting, for the most part, some kind of hands on or practical support. And that's definitely one thing you absolutely want to make sure that your program provides because it can count towards being more competitive in the job search process. And, to like bring my like practical side in, Elin was asking me, so you went and didn't feel like you were prepared to enter into exhibition development. That's like a little bit of a disconnect in your program. And it was like, yeah, I was getting some of the skills. Like, yes, we did have some hands-on things, but I like learned AutoCAD. Like I got a crash course in AutoCAD, but like I would need a while. I would need to have that skill beefed up. Photoshop obviously was a big part of that. And like I had dabbled in it, but didn't realize it was like, oh, I would actually need to like probably be more proficient, which I could get that skill anywhere. But, there are different things that I realized. But then I also got to do some hands on things of putting together an exhibition like proposal document that was part of my portfolio. So even like, again, that stuff counts, even if my design wasn't picked that the class went with, but it's okay. I have it somewhere. It's just like, oh my gosh, I was looking back at some of my designs there. I was like, what was I thinking? It was like for a space exhibit, and I designed a pedestal to look like it was like this curvy, almost looked like 70s, like that plastic, like retro
Yes.
design that to look like a space helmet at the top. I was going with vibes.
Yeah.
Like, no way. So yeah, so that there was some practical skills I got out of it, but overall just not understanding the level to which like the different nuances and things that were in a job like that. That was the harsh reality. But yeah, you can come away with some really great stuff and make sure that you absolutely noted on things.
Yeah.
And certainly in internships too, right? You're getting that as
Mhm.
well.
Mhm. Yeah, so it's like, I love theory, right? I think the theory is really important, and I think that, the base curriculum is important, but I think too you want to make sure your program is providing you with that. Think about it, can I put this on my resume? You need to make sure that your program is giving you those kinds of experiences alongside the theory education that you're getting.
And certainly too, right? There are some programs that you really it's like so tricky to navigate the language around this because there is absolutely specialized skills involved in every single job. And obviously
Mhm.
some specialized skills are valued more than others in this field. That's a whole nother layer
Mhm.
that equates into pay and other things within that we don't have time to get into.
Mhm.
But, really where I see definitely, grad degrees being beneficial and absolutely required are things like conservation,
Yeah.
collections, archival work really are the ones like top that I always see. And, you are learning in those programs to single them out, right? Like, yeah, you are getting those hands-on skills as like baked into those things. So yeah, those ones I'm like, yeah, it's required, but it's understandable in some ways. Yeah.
Yeah, I almost think about it more as like a trade school, right?
Mhm.
Where it's like
There you go. That yeah, I was trying to get to that language.
yeah, yeah, because it's like you are learning a practical skill, right? Like education, there is a lot of theory involved, and, there is a practical element that was involved in my program too, and in a lot of other programs, but, like, how to be a paper conservator, like, that's I think of it as more of like a trade level kind of education that, again, is required. Like, my brother's an electrician. He can't learn electrician based on vibes, right? Like, he had to go to trade school, and I think it's a similar thing for degrees that have a more technical component to them.
Well, I
Yeah.
think that's like what needs to be evaluated. And, we have our own thoughts of like the direction the field should move into, our own sort of
Mhm.
recommendations for next steps. But certainly, too, right? It's just like you can't blanket master's degrees across all aspects of museum work. And I think that just is like the default. And, as museums tend to lean back on old school hierarchical structures and all
Mhm.
those sorts of foundations. Yeah, it makes sense as to why now we're here and feeling that friction of change not happening in that way and what is happening in the world around us. One other thing I want to mention, unless you have a thought, Elin, is I do want to give a shout out to some of the programs that I have worked with as a career coach who have hired me to provide professional development. So actually preparing them for, submitting applications, resumes, cover letters,
Mhm.
interviews, things like that. So I'm really excited and glad to see that there are some really great programs out there that are really trying their best to prepare students because I don't think in my program that was really talked about or provided.
Mhm.
That's such one of the key things I think that needs to get included as all programs is just like you would in undergrad, right? You had the career center and things like that. And I feel like that piece often gets missed in grad school, but is absolutely needed, especially for our field.
Right, right, and so I think that goes along too with this, like, idea that some of these programs are just too theoretical. And I also wanna be clear too, like, sometimes you get to a point in your career where you literally just need a piece of paper that says, "I have a master's degree," and in that case, maybe these theoretical, more hands-off programs are great because you do just need that piece of paper, but if
Mhm.
you are trying to break into the field or needing to or wanting to move up and hitting barriers due to experience or things like that, you're gonna the programs that lean too theoretical might not give you the return on what you're hoping for. And I think too, Allie, yes, if we take a step back and I guess think about all museum schools as trade school, right?
Mhm.
As a learned skill for this field, there does need to be that hiring prep component to this and this preparation for the workforce because I think that's, along with being too theoretical, that is one of the bigger downsides of these programs of like, okay, I have a degree, but employers don't see your experience or your resume is busted or you don't know how to talk about your experience in a great way.
Mhm.
That's definitely, I think, an area where a lot not all, a lot of programs can fall short as they just treat it as this academic pursuit rather than as a trade school stepping stone opportunity.
Well, especially as we see the shift in now a lot of places preferring, even if they say a master's preferred,
Mhm.
they really want the hands-on skills.
Yeah.
So having now that shift also within these programs in that direction that you're saying
Mhm.
would support that and seeing where this is going. And
Mhm.
um, those were always my favorite classes were the hands-on ones.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's where we need to go.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I think those are the two big takeaways of maybe where schools are falling short is the theoretical and the career prep. And I think those matter at different levels to different people at different points in their career, right? If you're a mid-level and you just need the piece of paper, that doesn't matter, right? But if you're entry level, you're switching, you're wanting to move up, you want to make sure that you're picking some place that has hands-on knowledge that can go on your resume, that you can talk about in interviews, and that they are helping you to enter the workforce through hiring preparations.
Yeah. And providing uh actual assignments and activities that are going to feed into your resume. Like, I
Mhm.
was just thinking back to what I would do with interns. Like, I always wanted to make sure that they were coming away with something that not only they were learning, but then I'm like, here is a complete project that you can put on your resume to say
Mhm.
that you did. And even in my undergrad sort of elective course, I'm making them write a proposal essentially that is inspired by grant proposals or something. Maybe if I wanted to advocate for a program or something or an exhibition proposal, like it's a similar structure that they probably have not encountered that type of writing before. But I always tell them, like, if you are going into museums or even in other fields where, like, having to do this kind of writing, this persuasive writing and do benchmarking and things like that, you're going to have something that you can actually show that you know how to do that and will come away with a complete project. Getting professors to then structure their classes in that way. And, I think some of my favorite classes at GW were the ones where I was like, I had to write a grant proposal
Mhm.
and it was a hard class, that one and, like, a national, register application,
Mm.
and, like, oh my gosh, that class, I, like, was dying in because it was hard because I had never really had to write or think about writing that way, but oh my
Mhm.
gosh, did I need that so much in the work that I did afterwards. Or
Right.
financials, right? Like, that is another thing, like, so many places don't, like, that needs to be, like, boom, like, how to read a budget. Anybody's gonna work
Mhm.
with a budget in some sense, even if you're not going into development or anything that is financial leaning, like, having that knowledge is gonna help on so many levels. Any other, like, real world stuff that you're like, "Oh my gosh," course-wise or anything that you're like, "I wish they taught."
Something I really appreciated about my program was that our first internship, internship during our fall semester was audience based. So they identified gaps in our skill set of audiences we had not worked with and got us internships working with that audience. So I had always worked a ton with kids, right? Like I was in the classroom, I was always a babysitter and, all that kind of stuff. So kids were my jam. I knew kids backwards and forwards, but I had classmates who'd never worked with kids before. And then I went to work with senior citizens, which developed my love of working with seniors. I
Love
love
that,
them.
that's really
Yeah.
neat.
It was great. It was really impactful, and I think it was, again, that hands-on experience of expanding my skill set and my worldview and learning about myself too. So, and I also, though, too, like, I was a full-time student, right? Like, I did work part-time jobs and stuff and contract gigs and all of that, but I also, like, wanna recognize that sometimes these master's programs that don't offer these kinds of experiences are more of the for working professionals or things like that. So, just again, like, acknowledging that reality that sometimes you have to make concessions of, if I wanna gain this experience, is it through a grad program that's going to do it, or is it gonna be another way?
My gosh, I was just sitting here thinking, I was like, I don't know how I did it going to school full time. And then
Mhm.
I worked at least 3 part-time jobs
Oh, yeah. Oh,
all
yeah.
over
Yep. I
and still
was
found
like,
time for work. Oh my god, to do
right?
classwork.
Yes, and I was, like, at a museum pretty on like, every other weekend, it felt like doing a sleepover or doing a program or whatever. Because I was just trying to, yeah, I had a lot more energy at that point in my life, so, yeah, I was like, "How did I do it?" And I think, just like the last part I want to touch on here too is the financial reality of this, right? This is a consideration you have to make: tuition and living costs. And if you do a full time program, the lost income, entering at a low level within the field has low salaries, generally speaking. Are there long term earning limits that you might be coming up against? I know that's how it was for me. I hit a ceiling at a certain point, and Allie and I have been noodling over this episode for a while, and I don't ever think that my decision to go to grad school was probably not a financially sound one. And I don't say that to disparage the program, and because I loved it. I learned so much about myself and about the world, and I met my husband. Like, they're financially, it's it didn't make a ton of sense, but personally, socially, emotionally, it did, right? So I think that is again something that you have to consider if, especially if you're on the early side of things, is am I okay knowing that there are salary cap outs or ceilings or that I'm going to have lost income for a chunk of time? I think that's again just like, the financial reality of it. Would I choose to do the program again? Probably yeah, because I mean, God, I don't know. It's tricky because I am lucky. It is a tricky question you have to ask yourself, and I don't think that making this decision purely based on financials is the right one. I think that it has to be in pursuit of knowledge or pursuit of
Networks.
networks or emotional growth or social growth or whatever, however else you want to think about it, because you have to look at the ROI, and different pathways have different salaries and things like that. But an educator, unless you're moving up to director level, like you're not really going to make that much. Those are all just things to consider. It is a high investment, and the ROI, your return on your investment, is unclear financially, but maybe more clear in other realms. And, again, talking with a huge amount of privilege here about that, but and we'll dig into this more too with the third episode of this series of like, okay, well, I don't want you're making me kind of freaked out about this. I don't know that I want to go. What else can I do? We'll dig more into that too. And I think also knowing that as you get into higher levels of museum work, it's perhaps not a museum studies master's degree that would benefit you most. Maybe it's a MBA or, some other type of advanced degree that would be more beneficial at those higher levels of museum work. So things to consider.
No, my God, I couldn't have said it better. I'm sitting here, I'm like, yeah, you pretty much summarized it
Yeah.
because, and when I think it goes back to why this is just not a black and white question overall, like so many
Hmm.
layers, even going back and asking myself when you were answering, like, would I do this again? Yeah, there was like certainly things that I got out of that program beyond, skills and things. And then I look at the program that involved it now and I'm like, well, that probably would have been a better fit for me in terms of, my own theories and things. But then
Hmm.
I wouldn't be where I am today. I wouldn't have gone this pathway and all that stuff. So it's hard to say looking back. Probably actually did help me in a way land my first role. So,
Hmm.
which ended
Right.
me in Delaware of all places.
Yeah.
So maybe I would have ended up in another state, but
Yeah.
I'm
And
here in
it's just
Delaware.
right. And it's just so hard to like give a blanket advice on this because you really have to think about, where you're at in your career. What does this look like financially for you? Where do you want to end up geographically?
Uh, and a point I wanted to make too really quick is like thinking about the location of your program and also in proximity to other museums. Like part of the
Mm,
reason why I picked GW is I was like, DC is full of museums. So I know that I'm going to
mhm,
land on at least like a museum potentially to like intern or work at that is going to match my interest versus, there are some other programs where they're like connected to one museum, for
mhm,
example. So not to
right.
say, not disparaging that experience, but that, you might like that. You might want to be in a place that has access to more museums for things. So
Mhm.
I'm sorry, continue.
Yeah.
I know you're on a thought.
No. No, that's super important to consider. Yeah, that's why GW was so appealing to me too, was just, being the land of the Smithsonian was huge for me. So yeah, I think but the biggest question in all of this and the thesis of this episode and what you should keep front of mind is what am I trying to get out of this program? If I am going to go to grad school, what is my end goal? Is it employment? Is it network? Is it skills? And what kind of sacrifices am I willing to make or concede to in order to achieve that goal?
Yep. And this is a continuation, right? That's setting us up perfectly for the
Mhm.
next part two of this conversation where we're actually going
Mhm.
to, like Elin mentioned earlier, treat it like a job interview and
Mhm.
um, do your research and, give you guys some questions and things to ask places, but also a whole bunch of things to consider before you decide or land on a grad school or even, that can become part of your decision making process. So yes. stay tuned for our 3-episode series.
Yes.
And any final thoughts? Or, oh my gosh, I feel like we've ran the
Yeah.
gamut of all things grad museums and digging out of our brain, the recesses of our brain, to put
The
this
dark
together.
wine-filled corners of my brain from my time in DC. Yeah, I mean, and it's just like, I think a lot of times, again, DM people, we love to learn. And there's also, I think, sometimes this bias towards action rather towards progress, if that makes sense, right? Like sometimes we just want to feel like we're moving forward, even if it's just spinning our wheels. And I really want you to think and consider, how does grad school fit into that? Is it something that is quote unquote moving you forward? Or is it something that is providing you, is it an experience that's providing you something in return? It should be that two-way street there.
Yep. Empower yourselves.
Yep.
All right. Well,
All right.
we'll see you in the next episode. Join us for part 2.
Yay.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for tuning in to Curate Your Career. We hope today's episode gave you some ideas, encouragement, or at least a little bit of sanity for your museum career journey.
If you love what you heard, the best way to support us is to subscribe, leave a review, or share this episode with a fellow museum professional who might need it.
And don't forget, you can connect with us, send questions, or share your story at curateyourcareerpod@gmail.com or find us on Instagram at Curate Your Career Podcast. Don't forget to fill out our mailbag form and share your questions that might be featured on a future episode.
All right, now go take one small action toward the career you actually want. So don't just survive your museum job, curate it, one step at a time.